And we are here live at the Plains Hotel for our Pancakes and Politics, as we talked about. And first of all, I just want to thank our representatives and senators who carved out part of their time this morning to be with us here today to field some of the questions from the public concerning this very, very important budget session. And this morning we have Representative Dan Zwonitzer. We also have Representative Mary Throne. We also have Senator Stephan Pappas, Representative Ken Esquibel, Representative James Byrd, and Representative Tim Stubson. Can we give them a round of applause this morning for being with us here today? Also, we want to thank Blue Cross Blue Shield of Wyoming. That's clap. Starting to sound like Jeb Bush here. When he was at a meeting and he got done saying something and he told everybody, "Can you clap, please?" So, also Woodhouse Roden Nethercott LLC. Thank you for them. And also 1019 King FM, 1063 Cowboy Country, and AM 650 KGAB Town Square Media. All right, and we want to welcome all of you that are on the road in your homes, getting out of the shower, coming in from a jog this morning, whatever you are doing. Again, we are here talking with these folks from the Wyoming Legislature. As you know, this is a very important session, and already if you're looking in the papers or reading other sources of media, then you know that there's already been a lot of cuts, which has been talked about. And I'd like to start with who's got the microphone up there? All right, there you go. As long as I can see the microphone, we're good. We'll start with Representative Dan Zwonitzer. If we could just we got about an hour this morning, so brevity is the soul of wit, as they say. So if you can give us your overview of your thoughts on what is going on in the legislature, and maybe you can tell us what committees you've been on, sir.
Well, good morning, Dan Zwonitzer, House District 43, which is the east side of Cheyenne, Sun Valley, LCCC area. I chair the Corporations Committee in the House, and so we oversee utilities. First session I've had where we really had significant cuts. I always heard the war stories from my colleagues who were there in the 90s and said, the rainy days will come back. And I said, global economy, they're not going to be that bad, and I'm eating my words this session. So it has been a little difficult trying to balance out cuts and continue funding essential services while I think we've trimmed almost all the fat we could, and now we're making some deep cuts this week, especially today. So by the end of the week, I think we'll have a better picture of how far we're cutting and what we're saving and how upset we are at each other. So you picked a good morning to have this while we're all still getting along.
That's great. So far, so good. As long as the mouths are full of pancakes, I think we're good. All right, Representative Mary Throne.
Thank you, Gary. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see all of you, and welcome to all the people listening. I am Mary Throne. I'm the minority floor leader in the House, and I represent downtown Cheyenne, east of Central. The budget, of course, is what we're here for, and the important sort of overriding theme to me in the budget is that we need to prioritize people over buildings. We have roughly, and people on appropriations here can correct me if my numbers are off, we have roughly $300 million in capital construction, state capital construction projects, and that's unrelated to the capital project. To spend money right now when we need to make sure we do provide for those essential services, support local governments, and support our infrastructure. And it won't surprise anybody in this room to know that I am a strong advocate for Medicaid expansion. I find it very ironic that when we're cutting $100,000 here, there, and other places, we are choosing not to save $33 million for the state of Wyoming. It makes absolutely no sense to me.
I would have never got that from you, Representative Throne. All right, and we also have, actually, I have, not that this matters, but I have both of my representatives here, Representative Mary Throne and Senator, it's Stephan, right? Stephan Pappas. All right, sir, your turn.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you to the Chamber for putting on this event and for all of you out in the audience and all those listening on the radio. We think it's very, very, very important for us to get out in front of you and have you give us your thoughts and hopefully all my colleagues and I will listen and take that to heart. Again, my name is Stephan Pappas. I'm representing District Senate District 7, and we have the first two folks that spoke are the House districts in my Senate district, so we're well represented. So, and so starting my second year, this is actually my first budget session, and so trying to get my arms around the whole budget process. It's very complicated and detailed.
Kind of like a Rubik's Cube, isn't it? A little bit.
Probably to the 10th degree, yes. So anyhow, there's a lot of ins and outs of the budget, and this year, as you know, we've broken. There's not a single budget bill, and so we've broken up the budget into multiple bills, and we'll see how that works out. Whether that is going to be a plus or a minus. I do know that. We do. I hear from very, very many groups, and we do have a lot of austerity cuts in there. We have the quote penny plan where we're cutting most agencies 1% the first year and 2% the next year, and we have a lot of heartburn on that. But I think everybody has got to realize that we've got to get we have to be at some point where everybody has a little bit of skin in the game, and we have to reduce government. And so, and likewise, last year I was a co-sponsor of the Medicaid Expansion bill, and like Mary, I believe it makes no economic sense not to do that in this day and age. It's good for our businesses and wage income workers. So.
All right, thank you, Senator. Also, we have Representative Ken Esquibel. He is also the Minority Whip. Good morning, Representative. Thanks for being here today, sir.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, the Chamber, for hosting this great event. I think I've made it every time, and I'm in my 10th year in the House now, and I served 4 years on Labor, Health, and Social Services and Revenue, and then 4 years on Appropriations, and I'm currently serving on the Judiciary Committee. I guess one of the biggest things I've been looking at lately have been issues with the Revenue Committee. Last year I sponsored a couple bills that were going to look at diverting half of the 1% statutory money that goes into the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund, and then that was going to be distributed 3 different ways to school CapCon, Highway Fund, and local governments. That bill only got 2 votes. I think Mary also had another proactive revenue generating bill that I think she might have got 3 votes out of the Revenue Committee. We were also not pleased to hear that members of the Revenue Committee had signed the Grover Nordquist tax pledge. So, in my opinion, that if you're pledging your allegiance to somebody you probably never met, yet you take the oath of office to represent the citizens of Wyoming, and we get in a position like, and I wish we could go to the people and say, would you rather have the legislature going through a penny plan where we're making those austerity cuts, or looking maybe raising the sales tax by a penny? And I think that the citizens of Wyoming have had it pretty good for a long time, ever since we started the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund and collecting severance taxes. So I wish taxes could be part of the discussion, but like I said, all tax bills have to go through the Revenue Committee, and you can't get a tax increase through that committee. I think we were lucky to get the gas tax, but that was prior to the new makeup of this Revenue Committee.
All right, thank you, Representative Esquibel. Also, we have Representative James Byrd, and sir, you are the minority something chairman, and I can't read that. It looks like chaos, but I know that's not what it is.
Well, thank you. Good morning, Gary. If you talk to my legislative constituents, they would agree with you, and chaos is probably one of the main things that I do. Thank you again to the Chamber, and good morning to your listeners out there who have taken the time to have us try to enlighten them and give them an idea of what we do. My district is right downtown. We're actually sitting in the corner of my district. It's bordered by Central and I-25. It's basically the west and the south parts of Cheyenne. And Floyd Esquibel, who couldn't be with us, he's the... So when I talk about the things that are important to my constituency, it's most of you people sitting in this room, and that's really what I look for when we do things and look for adverse things in the budget. One of the things that I'd like to point out is I've been in the legislature. This is the end of my eighth year. And for 7 of those years that I've been in here, we've been talking about cuts across the board in some fashion or another. So for 7 consecutive years, we have been cutting government. We have been cutting spending and everything like that. And we've been taking good financial care of the monies that the state's entrusted to us. At some point, you have to realize, though, have you trimmed off all of the fat, and are you getting beyond that? And is this going to harm the functionality of government? Now, I know we can have a philosophical discussion whether government's good and bad, and those people who sign that pledge, part of that pledge is they'd like to make government so small they could drown it in a bathtub. But there are some essential government services that you just can't get by without. And we have to make sure that those are maintained and running on full power so that we can deliver those services so you as the business community steps that impacts you directly, and you should be very aware of that. And I think right now we are tiptoeing across that line very carefully. So like we've said, stay tuned right now. We're all friends with each other. The budget amendments will they've already been filed. They'll be coming out in a day, and it'll get interesting at that point. But thank you for letting me be here this morning.
Thank you, Representative Byrd. We appreciate that. Also, we have Representative Tim Stubson. I want to add that he is running for Congress and is the Senate Pro Tem. Good morning, sir, and thank you for throwing your hat in the ring in what's going to be a pretty interesting race, I think.
Sure, and thank you for having me. I guess I represent the diversity on the panel, the guy from Casper. But I've been in the legislature this will be my 9th session. I was an interim appointee when I first was brought into the legislature, and I was selected by our commissioners on a Wednesday. I was sworn in on Friday, and we started the budget session on Monday that first year. And so, every session since has been pretty easy by comparison, even this session. But as Gary said, I'm the Speaker Pro Tem of the House, which basically means I do the things that the Speaker doesn't want to do or doesn't have time to do. And I also serve on the Joint Appropriations Committee. And so we have been weeks of hearings in December, in 2 weeks of hearings in January, and the last 4 days of that second 2 weeks, we work through and mark up the governor's budget that he presents to us at the beginning of December. But it's been interesting to watch the world shift and really watch attitudes, especially in Wyoming, shift over that time frame. We would meet every morning before we started those hearings, and you'd pull up your web page and you see oil down 5%, you see the Dow down 200 points, you see natural gas prices down and production down, and it really it changed the way we looked at the budget, and the budget we've presented is much different than the governor's, in part because the world we live in is much different than the world that the governor prepared the budget in back starting in July. And so the process, today we will start, the House will have their shot at the budget. We've spent the last 2 days explaining the budget, and today the House and the Senate will bring their amendments to the budget. And it's really interesting, you sit down here, you work these long days, you put your blood, sweat, and tears into this budget, and it's imperfect, but it's a product of your labor, and you're sort of proud of it. And it's like a little baby, and you set it out there in front of the rest of the floor, proudly present it to them, and then they start telling you how ugly that baby is and how fat that baby is. But, ultimately what we've tried to do, and I think what we've accomplished in doing, is making sure that it's transparent of where we are financially as a state. And that where we are is our operations, take away all the buildings, take away all the one-time expenditures, and our operations still exceed what our revenues are coming in by about $34 million, even after the substantial cuts that we've made over the last 2 years. So we stand in a position where we are challenged going forward, meeting the needs of our state, especially if you look on the K through 12 education side, and we can talk about that a little bit more later. But thank you very much for having me. It's always great to be able to talk to people outside the Capitol about what's going on there. So.
All right, very good. Thank you. You're listening to AM 650 KGAB, My name is Gary Freeman. This is KGAB Mornings with a very special forum. We have representatives and a senator from the state of Wyoming here with us this morning live at the Plains Hotel. If you could please pass the microphone down to Representative Mary Throne. I would like to ask her this question first, and there is somewhat methods to the madness. Representative Throne, I'd like to, someone has asked in the audience, but I want to ask you first. What is the right amount to fund local government?
I don't think we've ever done the proper analysis for money at the state level. We have a LISRA of $1.8 billion, so we don't really have any sort of deficit of any kind as we sit here today. And I'm not saying we just, write large checks to local governments, but I think we need to have a better discussion about how we fund those basic services. Cheyenne is doing well. It appears to me we're doing well, thanks to many people in this room. But the little towns around the state and the oil and gas communities, they are going to start hurting if they have not already. And so what I would hope we would do over the interim is have a real discussion about local government funding. What do we need to keep the sewers running? Again, we shouldn't be building big, expensive CapCon projects that are unnecessary and then let everybody's water and sewer go down the tubes. So I really think we need to have the discussion. So I don't have a specific answer to your question, but we do need to figure out how much local government needs to fund the basic services that only they can provide.
Thank you, ma'am. Representative Dan Zwonitzer, I'd like to get your take on the exact same question, please.
I think I generally agree with Representative Throne that we've never had a great study. I think part of the issue is, we don't think of Wyoming as being that dynamic in population diversity, but Weed County and Pinedale and certainly Campbell County and those booms. And so you have a formula that kind of works for everybody, and then 2 years later, we have population shifts, and between the people who are moving, especially from the counties into the cities, not only in various counties throughout the state, but you have intra-county movement. And so trying to get the right amount for cities and the right amount for counties is kind of a moving target at all times. I think in good years, and we've had good years in the state while I've been in, we've certainly shared the wealth. Until this year, I don't think anybody can say that we haven't done right by local cities and towns when they look at our revenue picture and what we've passed on. And this is the first year that cities and towns want the same things the state wants. We would like a steady revenue stream and to be able to count how much money we have coming every year, and we don't get that in Wyoming very often because our economy is based on the mineral industry. And so I think we've done right by local governments, and up in this year, I think we will still do right by them this year, but the conversation's ongoing. We had the bill on first reading yesterday. We had an amendment on power equalization that somebody from the Revenue Committee can talk about that is changing the formulas again this year. And so it's really tough to discuss it with the public because every year we change this massive formula, and the revenue picture is always kind of a moving target.
Okay, Senator.
Can I just add one thing?
You may.
Not only what is the proper number that the state is going to provide amongst the towns, counties, you've probably heard of the different formulas that are out there that we're looking at. So the distribution of how we pay those funds, I think, is very important, especially for those communities that may be losing folks because of the downturn in the energy industry. They still have to fund their fire departments and their water and sewer districts and their, whatever. Those fixed costs won't go away. So it's going to be important for us to look at how we distribute it, especially for the rural communities.
Okay, Representative Esquibel, sir.
Thank you. Well, as you did hear earlier, that I said that our tax situation isn't the best. It's actually basically a one-legged tax stool. It's very volatile. So we depend so much on minerals to fund state government, and those revenues are declining, as Representative Stubson had said. So I think that's why it's important for us to look at sales tax. So for the first time in the history of the state of Wyoming, even though tourism only makes up 4% of the GDP in Wyoming, the sales tax generated from tourism is about ready to overtake sales tax generated from minerals or from the energy industry. So, tourism might be one of the ways that we can make up the difference in communities, but it's people from Converse County, Platte County, Goshen County. They come and do their shopping here in Laramie County. So that's why the Laramie County sales taxes are up. We also have impact from the Front Range. A lot of people are moving into this area of the state because of the closeness to the jobs in Colorado and our tax structure in Wyoming. So they're taking advantage of that. There's other areas of our tax situation that people are taking advantage of, and the Chairman of Revenue tried to address that last year in one way, and I tried to address it this year in a different way. So if I have a chance to get into those issues later, I'll further discuss them, but I think that's one of the things that's affecting local government. You can't do it across the board because every county is different. Just like, look at Jackson. You know, they make a lot of their money on tourism. So, and not a lot of people are going to Torrington other than prisoners.
Very good. Or to go look at the ruts in the road there. Representative James Byrd, I'm just going to reset the question for people that may be listening and just joining us. What is the right amount to fund local government in your view?
Well, actually, I have to concur with the rest of the panel here, as we don't know that answer because it is like shifting sand. The stress on the financial sides right now, they were predictable. Unless you've been living under a rock, you know that at some point, you know, our energy portfolio is going to start taking a hit. It just happened to be a little bit sooner and a little bit more dramatic than we all would have liked. But to the heart of the question, we don't, or we haven't taken a sincere look or a serious look at how we are going to distribute those funds, how we are going to work with the municipalities and the cities to make this work. And so that's one of those things that needs to be an ongoing thing. You just can't do one size fits all, and you can't, after you come up with a solution, it's not going to be one that sticks because of the volatility of the financial markets and everything that drive this. But one thing we can do at the state level is stop giving the municipalities and the local governments mandates where they have to do something, and then we turn around and refuse to fund it. That's all on us, and we shouldn't do that to them.
All right, very good. Thank you, sir. Representative Stubson, or Senator?
No, Representative.
No, it's Representative.
Yeah, you don't want to move me down the hall.
The thing says, yeah. Representative Tim Stubson, he's anyway, we'll leave that alone. Right here a little bit. All right, say for instance in Cheyenne, you can look at the book, see they have quite a bit of money, but maybe if you talk to the mayor, oh man, we need money. So I guess that's kind of where we are, and I know each town and city is a little bit different, but based on what I just shared with you, and maybe you've heard that in Casper as well, what in your view would be an amount or a right amount to help fund that local government?
Well, I think it's going to vary a little bit based upon economic conditions, and it is interesting. I mean, last biennium we, with local governments, there's what we call under the cap monies, which are sort of, it's a set amount, it's a steady amount, it's an amount that the municipalities and the counties can count on, and then there's over the cap monies, which is an extra appropriation, and that has varied pretty widely from biennium to biennium. And last biennium, the over the cap monies, we appropriated $175 million to local governments, and that was a record at the time. And yet we were still hearing from local governments, you know, we need another 10, 15 million more. And you hear that and you sort of expect that. I think what's even more important than just the amount is sort of making sure that it is stable, making sure that you don't build up expectations among those local governments and then pull the rug out and make them kind of scramble to figure it out. I mean, funding local governments is important. We need to do it, and so I think we as a state need to be integrally involved in making sure that local governments have that funding. But again, we need to take an approach that makes sure that that's stable over time, so that they can plan. And I think if we do that, then you know the amount becomes less relevant because they know. And they can plan on what's coming down the pike.
All right, 7:26 the time. Gary Freeman, KGAB Mornings, with a very special forum that we have here. We have representatives and a senator from the Wyoming State Legislature. Folks, I'm going to change this up a little bit because we have a lot of questions, but I would ask, if you're on a committee and for some reason I don't ask you the question, if you want to raise your hand and weigh in, we would appreciate that if that's okay with you guys. Okay, great. It's unanimous, I think. All right, so I want to ask Representative Ken Esquibel, sir. I want to get your thoughts with the discussion in reference to employee background checks and what your position is or what your thoughts are on employee background checks.
Well, if you're an employer and you're going to hire someone, I think you have the right to know what that potential employee's background is. And with done in your past that you regret today that is going to come back and haunt you. But certainly, I believe everybody deserves a second chance. If you look at the people that are coming out of prison, they deserve a second chance, and I would hope that employers are able to do that with people. And there's a lot of people that are serving time and come back out and are productive members of society. So if I was an employer, I certainly wouldn't want someone that I hired and then find out later that maybe they're one of the people that represents my company had been a bank robber in their past or something. I think, but if they had shoplifted when they were a teenager or something like that, that's a completely different story.
All right, thank you, sir. Representative Jim Byrd, like to weigh in on that employee background check, sir.
Yes, thank you. I think that it is the right of every business owner to execute a background check on an employee, and they really don't need another reason other than I'm hiring you. And in the process of doing that, we enter into an agreement that gives me some vulnerability about what your background brings to the legislature that was affectionately called ban the box. And what it is a prohibited question on a job application, which prohibits you from putting that question on a job application that says, have you ever been arrested or have you ever been convicted? My feeling is, as an employer, that's a question that you can ask in an interview. Because it's discriminatory in the nature that it's a checkbox or something on a application, and this person may have exactly the qualifications in their CV that you're looking for. But way back in high school, when he went out or she went out with their friends maybe and crossed the border down there, like some of us probably did when we were growing up here in Cheyenne, come back and have an encounter with law enforcement, that means from that point on, 17 years old to the day you die, you now have to check that box. That precludes you. And I don't think that 40 years later or 50 years later, that is relevant to your employment. Now, it may be because there are some jobs that require background checks. They require a squeaky clean police record, if you will. That, to me, is on the onus of the business owner. I do support that. I think it is really a necessary tool for business owners, but I think it shouldn't be asked on the hard application that somebody's filling out. It's for a discussion item in an interview.
Thank you, Representative Byrd. If you could please pass that to Representative Tim Stubson. I want to ask you, sir, and this is a question that I know people have asked on my program and people that I've talked to throughout, and of course you've probably heard it. How can we continue with a capital construction project with all the other deficits? A lot of people are feeling that we're hell-bent on making this into a Taj Mahal. They're fine with the upgrades that need to be done, but all this extra bells and whistles, they're not cool with that. Also, the Hirschler building, some people are saying we could stay that. The only answer I could come to possibly is that contracts were signed and be very difficult to get out of them. So with that background, how can we continue with the capital construction project with the situation that the state is at this time?
And it's a fair question. you know, I had started asking, I sit on the Capital Oversight Committee, which is sort of charged with overseeing the capital renovation, and we started asking, and Mary's on there as well, and we started asking about 6 months ago, you know, what does it look like? Can we do that and save some substantial monies on this project? I believe that it is important to move forward with the capital portion of the project. I mean, it's really been 15 years in the making. We've saved for 15 years for the project. We did that because we know there's volatility in our revenue stream in the state, and so you need to plan for those. There's not just the life safety issues. I think, frankly, the most important part of that project is that those of you who've gone to committee meetings in the Capitol realize that a lot of times people are standing out in the lobby because they can't even fit in the committee room. And there's no way that people can listen in on those committee hearings. There's no way they can be broadcast across our state. And so you got to be there in person. You got to be in the room, or you can't participate in the process. And in a state like Wyoming, that's not right. We need to make it so people are better able to participate in our process, especially from long distances. And that's really the focus on this project, is to make committee rooms that people can actually fit into, committee rooms where we can broadcast those things across the state, so that when bills are moving through in a three-day period, you can actually be in Sheridan and listen in if you can't be here. And I think that's important. If we're going to do it once in 125 years, we should do it right. And I think I don't think this is a Taj Mahal. I think it's honoring a historic building, and so I think that's appropriate. But with the Hirschler building, I did think there might be an avenue to just the problem we got, and frankly, I didn't ever get any clear answers on it. But the information we did get indicated that we've already vacated the Hirschler. I mean, we've rented space for those people. They're out. The design of the Capitol is integrated with the reconstruction of the Hirschler. And so really, what was communicated to us is that you're leaving essentially $20 million on the table if you just stop it. You can save some money, but you essentially burn $20 million in expenses that have already been incurred. And so I have to ask myself, can I go back to the people of Wyoming and say, well, we decided to stop it. We just totally wasted $20 million of your money, but, you know, we stopped the project. And that's where I came down that, you know, we're in this thing. We need to do it and do it right, and we'll get it done.
Okay, thank you very much. We can play hot potato right down here to Mary Throne. See, we're already on the same page here. So I would like to get your thoughts on that, ma'am.
First of all, I actually agree with everything Tim just said. And just to maybe talk a tad bit more about the Hirschler, we have scaled back the Hirschler project. We're looking at a much smaller Hirschler project than was proposed in some preliminary designs. And the Hirschler building really is connected to the Capitol. And when you expand those committee meetings in the Capitol, you lose office space. I mean, and plus when you put in better restrooms and all those other things that will happen in the Capitol. Also, the Hirschler building, the big bump up when we went from when we hit the $300 million price tag that everybody focuses on, a big chunk of that last increase was related to the fact that the skin on the Hirschler building is damaged, it's defective. So we have some deferred maintenance on the Hirschler building that needs to be done in any case. And as someone who spent 7 years in a closet in the Hirschler building, I can also tell you it is not a very pleasant workspace.
We are glad you've come out of the closet. Thank you very much. If we could move I've been in construction for many, many years, a town called St. Louis, a lot of old buildings, a lot of project management and things like this. You're an architect. One of the things that I'm looking at, and you know as well as I do, there's always addendums and additions to the drawings. Do you think, number one, that $300 million is really going to get the job done, and whether you do or not, but also, what are your thoughts on continuing with this capital project? Is it realistic in your view?
Thank you. Yeah, I've actually, Senator Nicholas, when I first got into the Senate, asked me to sit in on some of the steering committee meetings. And while I'm not on the steering committee, I have attended many of the meetings when I can. And I also sit on the advisory task force for some of the meetings that I attended dealt with the construction cost and how we were going to execute the construction administration. And I think the committee was kind of floundering early on, to tell you the truth. and they did have some issues with their designers. But right now, the folks that they have now brought on board, I think, are going to bring a level of security to the process, the way I see it. And I've looked at the numbers, and I'm confident. Early on, they did not have a good handle on where the major costs were to go. And the reason being because the design kept moving, kept shifting. I think they've got a handle now on what they want. The J.E. Dunn, the construction manager, has put numbers onto a fairly fixed design now. And I look at the number of different contingencies that are in place, and I'm pretty comfortable with those contingencies.
Okay, very good. But you know what I'm saying? Once you start to get into a building like the new police station downtown, and this isn't finding fault with anyone, but when you start to get into those buildings, sometimes surprises come, and we should that. Excellent.
And you're correct.
Yes. Thank you, sir. I'm sorry. We just got to move on. Representative Dan Zwonitzer, like to ask you, we can talk about Medicaid expansion, but I think what about kind of a universal health care across the whole state of Wyoming? People, concerning Medicaid expansion, we saw what happened in Montana, which is another mountain state, whereas on day one they were already over budget. People are talking 17 to 20,000 here. Then you have the woodwork crowd. In other words, those that would come out of the woodwork and be able to qualify. What are your thoughts on Medicaid expansion? Because I have a question. As a dyed-in-the-wool Republican, I firmly support Medicaid expansion. Why would we turn this money down if there is no continuing obligation by the state to fund the obligation? And if you want to share your thoughts, great, but maybe also some of your colleagues that are against it, if you could bring that to the table.
And so, I chair the insurance committee in the House, and I think since Medicaid expansion started, I've been one of the few Republicans that have said, yeah, it's actually a really good deal for the state, especially Wyoming. We are one of the few, if not the only state that had our premiums increase last year, and then we've also lost our second insurer on the marketplace. And so there's a whole lot of things all happening at once in Wyoming that is driving healthcare up, and it's frankly going to get worse in 2017 for people in the state unless we do. In general, I think even we took a realistic look. The number used to be 17,600. Based on what other states found when they went over budget, was they didn't adequately count the population that would be applying. And so now we've revised those numbers to 20,000. That certainly hasn't helped the argument that we have even more people that are going to be taking or applying for the service. But this is between the capital construction project and Medicaid expansion. Those have been the two largest discussions we've had internally, at least in the House this year. I don't think you're going to see any movement on Medicaid expansion in Wyoming. I've let enough blood out in the halls of the Capitol the last 3 years that the House just isn't there, and nor do I think they're going to be there until the next administration.
There's a certain senator that's not there either, but I'll refrain from sharing his name, but his initials are Charlie Scott.
And he's up in Natrona County where good Speaker Pro Tem's from, so as the mic goes down...
But, let's get the mic down. I want to get Representative Esquibel's take on the Medicaid. I know that a lot of you want to weigh in, but I want to try to get some other ideas here. Thank you, Representative Mary Throne. Appreciate that. Sir.
Well, we've been talking about this issue since my first year on the Appropriations Committee, and it seemed like back then the main issue was with the accepting federal money. And they take right now about $88 million of federal money, $888 million of federal money. Actually, yesterday one of our speakers was talking in millions of dollars, and I had to flash the card at him. No, that's billions of dollars that he was talking about. So we do talk about big money, and there's no reason why Wyoming can't put the trigger in that says if the federal government backs out of their deal, we can back out of our deal.
Thank you for adding that in. I just have to say that.
Yeah. And furthermore, if you just look at the cost savings for the state of Wyoming, to me it's a no-brainer because those people are going to get health care, and they're going to get it in the emergency rooms. This hospital in this county had over, was it $500 million in uncompensated care since I first started over the past 5 years, quite a bit. So I think that in the business community that you're paying higher premiums, like Representative Zwonitzer said, and I think you're also paying another tax in your federal tax returns for Medicaid expansion in other states. The governor has repeatedly said that, but there's actually a third tax you're paying, because in that sales tax, we have, you pay with your premium, you pay with your federal tax, and you pay with your sales tax.
Okay, thank you, sir. Senator Pappas, you wanted to weigh in on that?
No, I don't. I could, but what I was just wanting to say is I'm going to have to leave you all. I have a Senate Education Committee meeting, so I'm going to run right now, and so I just want to thank everyone for attending here and on the air, and to the chamber.
Thank you for carving out part of your morning.
If anybody's interested, Senate File 94 is going to be taken up in 15 minutes.
All right, thank you for carving
payment
out
of
part of your
education
morning to be
services.
here. Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Gary. I just wanted to quickly respond to, I think, the premise of your question, which is that lots of states have seen increased costs. While, every state is different, Nevada, which is a state similar to ours, is certainly, and their Republican governor is a big fan of Medicaid. But in those states that have seen increased enrollment that they didn't anticipate, overall, they have still saved money. I don't believe there's any state out there, except maybe Arkansas, but Arkansas did an unconventional expansion, so you can't even look at Arkansas and say that it even matters. We think we have a pretty good handle on the numbers, and I think the Department of Health increased Wyoming, and the data for Wyoming, the downside risk of Medicaid expansion pales in comparison to the upside benefit to the entire state of Wyoming.
Thank you, ma'am. I want to get the microphone down to Representative Tim Stubson. Your time is 7:44. You're listening to KGAB Mornings. My name is Gary Freeman. We are live at the Plains Hotel this morning with some representatives, and we had a senator, so now it's just all representatives. We're having a little forum here brought to you this morning by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Wyoming, Town Square Media, Woodhouse, Roden, and Nethercott, as well as the Chamber. Representative James Byrd.
Thank you, Gary. I, too, have a committee meeting this morning at 8 o'clock, and my chairman insists on punctuality. So I'd like to thank you, Gary, your radio station, the Chamber this morning for allowing us to have this conversation.
Thank you, Representative Byrd, for carving out part of your morning to be with us. Representative Tim Stubson, getting back here to the Medicaid expansion, I'd like to get your thoughts on this issue, sir.
Yeah, thank you, and I'm certainly in a minority on this panel. I on JAC was one of the members that removed the Medicaid expansion from the Department of Health budget, and in part, I think sometimes the question is asked, the wrong question is asked this time around, because even if you support Medicaid expansion, you got to look at the Med expansion plan that you want, because we know, for example, in Kentucky, they expanded Medicaid. They have tried to change their benefit plans. They've tried to change the way they do things, and they've run into roadblocks into making any changes down the road. And so what we have now, as compared to what the governor has presented before, we have just a straight Medicaid expansion. So those up to the 138% of poverty, we're talking able-bodied adults up to 138% of poverty. All those plans before us that the Senate addressed last time all had cost control measures in them, all had co-pay requirements, all had wellness visit requirements, those sorts of things that you would reasonably expect in a program to try to control costs in a program. None of that is in this. And that's because the governor's hand's been forced in some respects. This is just a straight expansion. It's these new Medicaid recipients receive the exact same thing on the exact same program as every other Medicaid beneficiary, and that was done because that's the way you have to do it through the budget, because the governor's not going to be able to get 2/3 vote to get his plan in. But what that leaves you with, I mean, the true question to answer is, if you're going to jump onto Medicaid and you know it's likely you're going to be locked in on the plan that you choose, do you want one that has absolutely no cost control measures in it? That's the question to ask. And for me, the answer is a pretty easy no. One that can be sustainable over time. Because how are we helping people if we adopt a plan that we either have to pull away in 2 years when the federal government changes how they're going to do their benefits. That doesn't help anybody. We need to have a sustainable package over time. And I know the comment was made, oh, we can just get rid of this if the federal government pulls back their 90% support, but we don't know that, because this isn't a different Medicaid. This isn't a waiver. If we had a waiver, sure, we could say we're going to do away with the waiver. This isn't a waiver. This is just an expansion of our current plan. And so you can opt out of Medicaid as a whole, but how do you we don't have any assurance that you can opt out for just part of the population. So those are some of the finer points that are getting lost in the discussion. And I think even if you support Medicaid expansion, you should really look hard in how we do it to make sure that we can control costs over time and make sure we have a sustainable program over time.
All right, Representative Stubson, thank you. Representative Ken Esquibel, did you want to weigh in on this topic? And you might as well hold the microphone, because I got another question for you after this.
Sure. Well, my very first year on JAC, and when Governor Meade was elected, he wanted to hire someone to run the Department of Health more like a business. So he hired the city manager from Casper, because the former director was a doctor, and he thought he ran the Department of Health like a hospital. So I do believe that he would, as a former city manager, control costs. But if you go into the budget, it looks more like this. So let me just read some figures. JAC reduced $3.8 million of general fund money for a tax refund for elderly and disabled. Then JAC denied governor's recs to expand Medicaid and add $950,000 general fund for prescription drug assistance programs. JAC denied governor's rec to expand Medicaid and added $4 million for adult services. JAC denies governor's rec to expand Medicaid and adds $670 general fund for end-stage for children's special health, general fund for breast and cervical and colorectal screening, $1 million general fund for substance abuse and suicide prevention, another $750,000 for HIV and AIDS medications, $2.7 million for outpatient substance abuse treatment, $2.9 million for residential mental health treatment, $6.3 million for residential substance abuse treatment. So we were replacing all those programs from federal funds to general funds. So your tax dollars, like I was talking earlier. So that goes back to what Representative Throne said. How do you put the burden on the taxpayers of Wyoming?
Well, and there's some other discussion. I want him to hold that microphone, Representative Throne. Thank you very much, because we've got to move on. We've got about 9 minutes left. But piggybacking Representative Esquibel on what you just said, some people are saying, and they're not trying to demonize the university, but how can we justify putting $8 million or whatever it is into an athletic program when we have people that we need? Now, I recall the governor saying in his statement that we need to be careful not to put programs over people. Would this be an example of what you're talking about, in part, not in full, but even in part, about looking at some of these like athletic programs and other programs like that to possibly...
People don't understand is those come out of different budgets. It's also a match, which the state doesn't have a lot of programs they get a 2-for-1 match on. But yeah, we're building buildings and we're going to lay off people.
Okay, we're going to move right along, and again, just so I want you to please hold that. Yes, sir. Thank you. If you would, please. We've got about 8 minutes left. I want to ask you this question to Representative Ken Esquibel. For those of you joining us, we are here live at the Plains Hotel with our Pancakes and Politics. We have representatives here, and we are wrapping this up. Having a good educational system in a community attracts business to that community. Cutting education funding can impact our educational system. What is your commitment to keep education funding whole?
Well, I support what the recalibration, the Committee on Recalibration did, which was to keep that funding flat. In JAC, they reduced the external cost adjustment. I'm not exactly sure what the figure is. 45 million? 45?
Yes, 15 in the first year and 30 in the second.
Okay. So absolutely, you know, if the backbone of the future of the state of Wyoming is our children, then at least keeping facing in this community is overcrowding in our schools. It seems difficult for me to tell people that live across the street from a new school that they can't, their kids can't go to that school. We're busing kids. We have about 700 new homes that are going in the east side of this city. You just drive around, you see a lot of good development going on.
I think they're
Houses are
talking
selling.
1,480 over the next 3 years.
Exactly. We're trying to get a new junior high built in the east side of town. We got the design money in that. I tried to be a little bit more proactive. I think that school should probably be under construction right now. Things move slow in the construction area of building schools. We have 40 modulars in this community the kids are going to school in. So, maybe Representative Stubson wants to dovetail on that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Representative Esquibel. I'd like to turn it over to Representative Stubson and get your thoughts on that, please, sir.
Yeah, and you really touch on the largest known problem that we have. And we talk so much about the general fund side that this gets overshadowed. And really, it's the education side of funding that is the critical factor to look forward to over the next 2 years. Because what we have, as the budget came to us, what you're looking at in the 19 and 20 biennium is a $500 million deficit on K through 12, expect to have in revenues. In addition, what you have is that our capital construction program, I think the last biennium, it was $400 and some million we appropriated for school CapCon across the state. This year, that's $18 million. And that's because that's all we have. The cold bid bonus monies that we have used to finance billions of dollars worth of construction around the state are gone. And so those funds that we've relied upon on building our school system, the infrastructure, the capital infrastructure are gone. And so that $500 million deficit that you talk about assumes zero construction around the state. That's an issue that we have not yet solved. And the $45 million cut in the ECA, we did that, and then there was $48 million transferred out of schools funding to kind of balance the budget this year. We're trying to make steps to deal with that, but it's the biggest known problem that we have.
Okay, 30 seconds or less because we're wrapping up here on our special forum, our Pancakes and Politics. 7:55 is the time here on AM 650 KGAB. Representative Stubson, in 30 seconds or less, give us a wrap-up, sir. Final thoughts, whatever.
Again, thank you so much for having us. This budget session, I think somebody said it, more than any budget session I've ever been involved in, people are focused really on the budget. And you see that in the number. I think that's a good thing. And maybe I want to leave on a high note, because despite the struggles we have, we've been planning for this. We've got savings. We've been investing in economic development heavily over the last 15 years. So it's not something where we should roll up the streets and go into the basement. I think there's real hope going forward.
Okay, Representative Ken Esquibel, sir. Final thoughts, comments?
Thank you. The $22 billion in assessed value in the state of Wyoming, about 7.8 in permanent mineral trust fund, 1.8 in the LISRA. We're in a better situation now than the last time we went through this downturn, and we'll make it through it again. We always persevere.
Thank you, sir. Representative Mary Throne, final thoughts and comments. 30 seconds or less.
You just took up 10 seconds of my time. In any event, how you respond to a crisis tells you a lot about a state. Wyoming is a strong state. We have a lot to offer the world, but we need to not panic. We have to react appropriately. We have to continue to provide appropriate government services. We do have the savings to do that, and we'll weather this storm.
Thank you very much. And finally, Representative Dan Zwonitzer.
Thanks, and I agree with all three of my colleagues. I think we just have to be cognizant that it may continue to get a little bit worse before it gets better, before we get out of the storm. And so $100 million into the LSRA, but that's supposed to be our safety long term. And so it's still going to be tough, and we're going to cut some things this year, and it's going to hurt. But we're looking forward to a year from now and things coming back and a long-term sustainable future.
All right, very good. On behalf of the Greater Cheyenne Chamber of Commerce, Town Square Media, Pancakes and Politics, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Wyoming, Woodhouse Road and Nethercott LLC, and our representatives and senators in the Wyoming Legislature. We want to thank you for joining us here today, and may we give them all a round of applause for being here. Thank you so much. Back to you, Doug Randall, for our regular scheduled programming. Thank you.